On May 14, 2020 in New Mexico, warrants were executed to obtain the personal and official county-issued cell phones of Rio Arriba County Sheriff James Lujan. The search was connected to two separate incidents in which Lujan, not in his official uniform, attempted to disrupt the investigations conducted by the Espanola police. The officers involved in these incidents confirmed that they had not summoned him to either scene and believed that he was hindering their efforts. The initial incident took place in March 2020 when the police were trying to execute an arrest warrant for former Espanola City Councilor Philip Chacon, who was accused of mistreating one of his tenants. Initially uncooperative, Chacon barricaded himself inside his residence. During this standoff, body camera footage captured Lujan's unannounced arrival at the scene, where he instructed a female officer to withdraw and asserted that he would handle Chacon's apprehension.
I don't know. I wasn't here.
When did you stop Jacob? Sorry.
Earlier.
Today?
Yes.
He seemed okay. He was a little off, but he was okay.
Oh, so this is a current incident.
Yeah, no, it happened today. He's off his meds, so he's fried, but he'll listen to me. He called me a while ago before all this crap went on, but I was out in Abiquiu, so I said, oh, I'll be on my way. Jacob was over here cleaning weeds and two other guys. Justin and I went and checked the camper. He's not in there, so he's in here. He called me in here this morning to tow a truck, and I did. He told me that if he wasn't here, he was going to go to the camper. I'm telling you, I will bring him in. Okay? Pull everybody out. I'll bring him in.
I don't want to pull them out.
Huh?
I don't want to pull them back.
Excuse me? I'm not asking. Phil Chacon? That's who you have a warrant for?
Right.
You're in charge?
Yeah, yes.
Pull your people back. I'll bring him in.
Bring who in?
Feeling pressured, the female officer contacted a superior officer to manage the situation. Ultimately, Chacon surrendered and was taken into custody. However, during the encounter, Lujan disclosed to Espanola officers that he had been in contact with Chacon while Chacon was still inside his residence. Lujan also showed the officers text messages that implied Chacon was not present in his home, but rather in Santa Fe at one point. Throughout the investigation of Chacon's case, the police discovered texts, social media messages, and emails that raised suspicions about City Councilor John Raymond Vigil's involvement. It was alleged that Chacon had provided Vigil with information regarding other violent incidents he had been a part of. When initially questioned as a witness by the police, Vigil claimed he had received random content, including pictures from Mr. Chacon, which he would never view. Vigil was also accused of advising Chacon on how to avoid the demolition of a property he sought to purchase during a council meeting. Due to his actions and failure to cooperate with the police, Vigil faced charges including 2 counts of conspiracy, 1 count of unlawful interest in a contract exceeding $50, all classified as 4th-degree felonies, and a misdemeanor charge for refusing to assist an officer in connection with Chacon's investigations. However, all charges were later dropped, and Vigil was elected as the mayor of Espanola in 2022. All of these events are related to the second incident in which former Sheriff Lujan became involved. In May 2022, Lujan resurfaced, this time accompanied by Under-Sheriff Martin Trujillo and Detectives Ernest Susuedo and Zach Wright.
Nobody answered. We came back, the garage door was closed, so we knew somebody was home.
Yeah, that's it.
We're just doing our
He didn't
job,
know
sir.
it. He called me and just all scared, and I go, what's going on? Come to my house.
Yeah, no, and I told them over last week I have
The garage door was open.
No, yeah, no.
That's not going to happen. It's a warrant, and he thought it was a municipal court judge signing it. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
They arrived at Vigil's residence to execute a warrant for Vigil's phone, which had been the source of some of the evidence mentioned earlier in the previous incident. Lujan contacted Vigil's attorney, but eventually, Vigil emerged from his home, and his phone was seized by the detectives without further complications. Lujan, who had already raised suspicions due to his unusual behavior during the Chacon standoff, further intensified the inquiry on himself. Later, Lujan's phones were confiscated, and his case was thoroughly investigated, leading to his conviction.
Yes, Your Honor, I try to do the best that I can to help everybody I can, and They put their trust in you to uphold the law.
I in no way would want to harm anyone.
And you let them down. People of Rio Arriba County elected you to be sheriff.
State District Judge Kathleen McGarry Ellenwood sentenced former Rio Arriba County Sheriff James Lugin to 3 years in prison, followed by a 1.5 years of probation. This decision came a day after a Santa Fe jury found him guilty of 2 felony charges related to his assistance in helping an individual evade arrest and directing a deputy not to disclose this information. While delivering the sentence, the judge emphasized that all elected officials have a duty to fulfill the responsibilities of their office, and certain officials like judges, district attorneys, and sheriffs are held to higher standards. She added that Lugin had let down the people of Rio Arriba County, who elected him and the sheriff's office he led. The judge also highlighted that Rio Arriba County does not have its own set of laws, and the law applies uniformly throughout the state. No one, including Lugin, is above the law or entitled to disregard it for personal gain. Lugin resigned from his position as sheriff approximately an hour after his conviction, as confirmed by Rio Arriba County Manager Lucia Sanchez. In a brief letter, he expressed his decision to step down with a heavy heart. Lugin's conviction originated from his involvement in helping former Espanola City Councilor Philip Chacon avoid arrest after a high-speed chase in 2017. In this case, Lugin was found guilty of assisting Chacon by picking him up at his home following the pursuit and driving him away in a patrol vehicle. Lugin was also convicted of intimidating or threatening a witness, specifically one of his former deputies, Cody Lattin, who had been taken to Chacon's house that night, and Lugin directed Lattin not to disclose these actions or discuss them over the police radio. Lugin's defense attorney, Jason Bowles, intends to appeal the verdict and wants Lugin's release pending the appeal, citing restrictions on the cross-examination of Cody Lattin. However, the judge denied this request, and Lugin was taken into custody by Santa Fe County Sheriff's deputies. 9th Judicial District Attorney Andrea Reeb, who served as the special prosecutor in the case, expressed her expectation of appeals, but remained confident that no aspect of the trial justified a reversal of Lugin's convictions. She noted that she began observing a pattern with Lugin, describing his encounters with law enforcement as combative and characterized by a power struggle, asserting his position as the top law enforcement official in Rio Arriba County. Reeb also mentioned that she received numerous reports accusing Lugin of misconduct, but many individuals were hesitant to come forward, leading to the initiation of this investigation.
The Espanola police conducting high-speed pursuits.
He is an elected official who used his power.
As I was investigating that, I started getting lots of calls.
They were not safe. They were not in accord with the Safe Pursuit Act in the state of New Mexico.
An ability to determine whether his friend Philip Chacon would be arrested that night.
From other people about concerns they had that Sheriff Lujan had done other things.
Sheriff James Lujan was concerned about 2 things. One,
but feels he's above the law. A man who was elected to uphold the law.
She urged the court to impose the maximum penalty, emphasizing that as an elected law enforcement official responsible for upholding the law, Lujan should be held to a higher standard than the average person. Dennis Maez, a private investigator employed by the New Mexico Attorney General's office to assist in this case, brought up other allegations of unlawful and unethical conduct against Lugin. He mentioned an ongoing civil case filed by the American Civil Liberties Union, accusing Lugin of harassing a journalist, as well as a lawsuit filed by a former deputy in Lujan's office, alleging violations of the State Whistleblower Act. Maez also pointed out a $55,000 settlement paid by Rio Arriba County in 2020 to a Chama man who claimed Lugin had stopped him and used offensive language for displaying a Mexican flag on his truck on the 4th of July. Maez, drawing on his experience as a Secret Service agent, emphasized that he had interacted with various law enforcement agencies worldwide, but had never encountered an agency with the characteristics of Sheriff Lugin's. In his view, if anyone deserved a significant prison sentence, it was James Lugin. 2 of Lugin's 4 sons spoke in his defense during the court proceedings. They argued that the portrayal of their father by the prosecutors did not reflect the true character of the man they knew, a former Marine and dedicated public servant who tirelessly worked to support his community. Brandon Lujan, one of his sons, emphasized that his father was his hero, and he had spent the first 18 years of his life closely attached to him. He defended his father as an honest and kind-hearted man who did not deserve the negative image presented in court. Lauren Reichelt, the Rio Arriba Health and Human Services Director, addressed the court as a private citizen, but noted that her opinion of Lujan was shaped during their collaboration in combating drug misuse in the community. She recounted their efforts to introduce Narcan, an anti-opioid overdose drug, and the initial resistance from law enforcement. However, she praised Lujan for changing his stance and leading the training of deputies in using the medication. This effort resulted in a 36% decrease in overdose deaths, which she attributed to Lujan's leadership and support. Lujan himself briefly spoke, expressing his intent to help and not harm or hurt anyone. He gestured toward his sons before being led away, notably not handcuffed, unlike most convicted felons. On December 6th, the Rio Arriba County Commission appointed then-Major Billy Merrifield, a 7-year veteran of the Sheriff's Office, to serve as sheriff until the next election in 2023. Joseph Miedzianowski's story is one of extreme corruption within the Chicago Police Department. Despite his seemingly illustrious 22-year career as a police officer in Chicago, he concealed a shadow of corruption. Behind the badge and uniform, he abused his position of authority to enrich both himself and his criminal associates. The extent of his criminal activities is shocking. Throughout his career, Miedzianowski joined forces with gang members to operate a cocaine distribution network. He exploited his deep knowledge of the gang world, using street informants to extort drug dealers and sell illegal substances. Disturbingly, he was not the sole officer involved in such criminal activities. There were others within the Chicago police force participating in unlawful deeds during that time.
Whatever caused him to turn to the dark side was now more important than the police department, was more important than his job. But he used the job to further whatever it is that he was doing in his criminal life.
Despite his criminal activities, Miedzianowski managed to accumulate nearly 60 praises for bravery and high-profile arrests. He was often praised for his role in combating drug and weapons-related crimes. In 2001, Miedzianowski's crimes finally caught up with him, leading to his arrest and subsequent trial. During the court proceedings, his family was present, and the judge expressed sympathy for them while condemning Miedzianowski's actions. U.S. District Judge Blanche Manning informed him that he had betrayed society by trafficking drugs and supplying street gang members involved in his crack cocaine distribution operation on the very streets he had sworn to protect. Brian Nettles, the lead prosecutor in the case, described Miedzianowski as a rogue cop who had betrayed the true heroes in law enforcement, those honest officers who risked their lives daily. Nettles outlined Miedzianowski's crimes, which included revealing the identities of undercover police officers to gang members, safeguarding criminal organizations, trafficking substances, and providing street gangs with ammunition. The judge dealt with this corrupt officer decisively, sentencing Miedzianowski to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his convictions on drug conspiracy and racketeering charges. This is the story of Matthew Dages, a former La Mesa police officer, who finds himself at the center of a highly debated arrest video. The question of whether he will be charged for fabricating a police report is now uncertain. The initial examination of Matthew Dages related to the incident that sparked days of protests has recently concluded. He now faces allegations of knowingly presenting a falsified police report. Once again, the arrest video takes the spotlight in the courtroom, where a clear divide exists between Dages' supporters, who believe the case lacks merit, and those advocating for Amari Johnson, who argues that the charges against Dages do not fully address the underlying issue. In a courtroom scene, Matthew Dages, a former La Mesa police officer, appeared clean-shaven and dressed in a suit. He maintained a composed demeanor as he attentively listened to Detective Julie Jensen's testimony. Jensen's account shed light on the events surrounding Dages' encounter with Amari Johnson. She stated that Dages initially approached Johnson on suspicion of smoking on the Grossmont streetcar platform and suspected that Johnson had engaged in physical aggression.
Mr. Johnson swatted at his hand or pushed his hand.
The incident, which occurred in May 2020, was captured on body cameras and by onlookers, revealing a tense exchange from both the officer's perspective and that of bystanders. During the encounter, Johnson explained that he was searching for a friend who lived in a nearby apartment complex. While Johnson's initial contact with law enforcement was related to smoking in a public area,
I'm talking to you and you smacked me.
Bro, nobody smacked you, bro. Why I smack you?
You didn't?
Why I smack you?
You didn't?
Why
You didn't? You didn't hit my
Why I
arm?
smack you?
the situation rapidly escalated, with Johnson being informed that he was being detained for allegedly assaulting an officer. Subsequently, all charges against Johnson were dropped, and the focus shifted to Matthew Dages, the former La Mesa police officer. He faced a serious charge as the district attorney pressed a felony count against him for submitting a fabricated police report. The allegations against Dages centered on him providing misleading information, claiming that Johnson was involved in smoking and evading fare payment at the trolley station. In the courtroom, local activists made their presence known as they rallied in support of Johnson, visually demonstrating their solidarity and backing for his cause. This incident occurred shortly after the tragic murder of George Floyd, which sparked widespread anger and protests in the local community.
The report is that he thought he was smoking. He didn't think he was smoking because he had no cigarettes, he had no lighter, he didn't even raise a lit object to his lips. This is a lie.
The timing of this encounter further intensified the situation, adding an extra layer of emotion and intensity. For those supporting the discharged police officer, their perspective on the entire scenario is seen through a political lens. Dages is now facing a potential 3-year prison sentence.
Days after this George Floyd incident, it's very volatile. I mean, our society, they want to demonize police officers. It's time that we stand up and support our police officers.
This is the story of Roy Oliver, a former officer with the Balch Springs Police Department who worked for 6 years before committing a tragic and senseless shooting that took the life of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. The teenager was unarmed and seated in the passenger seat of a departing vehicle when the officer opened fire. In the aftermath of the incident, Oliver was placed on administrative leave and eventually fired on May 2, 2017. Subsequently, the Dallas County Sheriff's Department and the Dallas County District Attorney's Office conducted an investigation into the shooting. On May 5, 2017, Roy Oliver was charged with murder and an arrest warrant was issued. Later that day, he turned himself in and was released after posting $300,000 in bail. Roy Oliver's murder trial faced 2 delays before commencing on August 20, 2018. On August 28th, he was found guilty of Jordan's murder, and the following day, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. His attorneys announced their intention to challenge both the sentence and the guilty verdict. However, the Texas Fifth Court of Appeals denied Oliver's appeal on August 10, 2020, upholding his murder conviction and sentence. This is the story of Anthony Warlock, who found himself at the center of a legal inquiry due to allegations of assault. However, during the court proceedings, an unexpected incident involving a nearby deputy unfolded.
The investigation for false imprisonment, assault in the 3rd degree, assault as a Class 2 felony, and a misdemeanor charge as well in possession of drug paraphernalia.
I'd like to object first. If I'm under investigation, I thought the investigation came first, then the rest.
While Warlock was in conversation with the judge, a disturbance involving the deputy occurred. The vigilant judge swiftly intervened, leading to the deputy's arrest before any formal charges were filed. Subsequently, as a result of the incident, Warlock pursued a civil rights case, and he was awarded a settlement of $50,000 to resolve the matter.
Fort Worth police officer received 5 years in prison for lying under oath. John Romer was found guilty in 2019 for making false statements to the grand jury about this 2016 confrontation when he punched a man in a hospital lobby.
This is the story of John Romer, a former police officer who once vowed to uphold the law, but has now found himself on the other side of it, behind bars, facing the consequences of his actions.
It is therefore the order, judgment, and decree of this court that the defendant, John Preston Romer Jr., is hereby sentenced to 5 years confinement in the institutional division of the Texas Department.
John Romer, the ex-police officer, was arrested and taken into custody more than 4 years after an incident in a hospital lobby that was captured on surveillance cameras. In 2019, he was found guilty of lying under oath about the events that transpired that day and has now been sentenced to 5 years in prison.
Couldn't have been a more severe, aggravated perjury. All the lies that he told to cover up his excessive force.
During the incident, Romer, working in an off-duty capacity, was involved in a physical altercation with a 20-year-old man named Henry Newson. Prosecutors recently reviewed the case before the judge handed down Romer's punishment for committing perjury. Newson, during the incident, had borrowed a bystander's cell phone to call for a ride. The situation escalated, and Romer took Newson into custody. Romer had testified to a grand jury that he had arrested Newson before resorting to physical force, but surveillance footage with audio proved otherwise, demonstrating that Romer's statement was false and resulting in his perjury conviction.
Romer told him, if I let you go after having to throw you on the ground and hit you, then I'm in trouble. He didn't have to throw him on the ground and hit him. But he committed to a lie on that day, and we're here 4.5 years later, still dealing with it.
Following the incident, the charges of trespassing and resisting arrest against Newson were eventually dropped. Romer's lawyer argued in favor of probation, asserting that the perjury case against him lacked a solid foundation.
It's a case that has no bones, it's a case that has no substance, it's a case that has no materiality. The statement, you're under arrest, is not material to anything that was litigated in this courtroom. It's a complete jellyfish of a case.
You know, as a police officer, we fairly expect as citizens for you to be a person that upholds the law. And when you fall into making false statements.
After careful consideration, the judge determined that a 5-year prison sentence was an appropriate outcome for this case.
Stand these rights, Mr. Romer. Sheriff, he's your prisoner.
Romer could have faced a sentence of up to 10 years in prison, but it remains uncertain whether the state will proceed with the pending charges of official oppression, as any sentence for that would not exceed the one he has already received. This is the disturbing story of Barilio Gonzalez, a 47-year-old individual who was arrested in 2018 on multiple counts of molestation involving an 8-year-old child.
The Miami-Dade police lieutenant under arrest for molesting a child.
You know, guys, really disturbing details surrounding this case.
The horrifying crime began in 2011 and continued for 2 agonizing years until 2013, when the young girl turned 10. To protect the victim's identity, we'll refer to her as Jane Smith. Jane revealed to the authorities that she had been living in fear for her life, which had prevented her from coming forward sooner.
This is a mugshot of Miami-Dade Police Lieutenant Barilio Gonzalez, a veteran member of the Miami-Dade Police Department SWAT team.
During this period, Gonzalez subjected Jane to various forms of inappropriate touching, leaving her traumatized.
The lieutenant abused a female, according to documents, over a period of 2 years, and at one time held a gun at her head.
It's truly sickening. The question arises, how was this child molester eventually apprehended, and what brought these heinous crimes to light after being hidden for years?
Well, this lieutenant was booked a little after 5 o'clock this afternoon. According to documents, this abuse happened several years ago. Here's the story.
Jane confided in her therapist about her harrowing ordeal, and this revelation set in motion the investigation that led to Gonzalez's arrest in May of 2022.
This little girl told a psychiatrist on September 5th about the alleged abuse that took place between 2011 and 2013.
As a result, Gonzalez is now serving his sentence behind bars, providing some relief to the children of the Miami-Dade area, who no longer need to live in fear of this predator roaming the streets.
So tonight, life in prison. That is the sentence handed down to a former Miami-Dade police officer convicted of molesting several girls. 2 of the victims spoke about what happened to them. Gonzalez was arrested in 2018 after a victim told a psychologist he fondled her several times when she was between 8 and 10 years old.
So at this time, based on the jury's findings, on every count, I'm sentencing you to life in prison. Count 1 will be a 10-year minimum mandatory. Counts 2 through 9 will have a 25-year minimum mandatory. Everything will run concurrent.
Brendan Wyszynski, who was only 18 years old at the time, allegedly pulled over a vehicle near 4th Street and I-40. An observant officer passing by noticed that something seemed amiss with the situation. Upon closer inspection, the officer discovered that Wyszynski was driving a vehicle that resembled a police car, and he was also wearing a badge on his belt. Wyszynski claimed to be a Bernalillo County deputy, but the officer quickly determined that he had no affiliation with BCSO. Consequently, Wyszynski was arrested. During his court appearance, Wyszynski pleaded not guilty. However, Judge Sandra Engel made it clear that he was not permitted to possess any weapons, including handcuffs. She emphasized, "You are not to have any lethal weapons, firearms, knives, and I'm going to go so far as to say handcuffs. I really don't want you to have anything that could be used in connection with this crime." As a result of the case, Judge Sandra Engel sentenced Wyszynski to a year of probation. Brendan Wyszynski was charged with impersonating a deputy, a misdemeanor. His family reported that he had received threats and lost multiple jobs due to the incident. In Tampa, Florida, a man named John Inglis, age 26, was arrested for impersonating a police officer after he pulled over 2 victims. Additionally, Inglis was accused of violating an active risk protection order. The Tampa Police Department officers reported that they seized a firearm during the arrest, and this weapon matched one that had been stolen in a separate incident under investigation by the Florida Highway Patrol. According to reports, a victim was stopped by a 2020 Land Rover SUV equipped with red and blue lights. The victim informed the Florida Highway Patrol that they believed the man who had pulled them over was a law enforcement officer. Inglis's actions led to his arrest on charges of impersonating a police officer and violating a risk protection order. The seized firearm may have implications for the separate investigation by the Florida Highway Patrol. This is Wayne Couzens, a 48-year-old Metropolitan Police officer who committed a heinous crime that sent shockwaves through the United Kingdom on the evening of March 3, 2021. On that night, he abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered Sarah Everard, a 33-year-old marketing executive who was walking home from a friend's apartment near Clapham Common in South London. Couzens, who was off-duty at the time, pulled up next to Everard, identified himself as a police officer, handcuffed her, and forced her into his car.
So we're here to talk to you about Sarah. Show the picture. Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay.
So you must have something to say that I know her.
Well, like I said, you've been arrested on suspicion of kidnap, and we believe that you've been involved in her disappearance and taking her away from her family.
Okay.
Now, we believe that you know something about where she is, and that's why we're here, to look for her and to try and find her. And that's why we're talking to you now, is to try and get you to have a good think about it and has anything to care about whether or not it's fine.
Financial. And I've been lent on by, I don't know who they are, they're a group, a gang, whatever, and they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them. So I said, happily, and it then came through that they're going to harm my family, take them away, and they'll use them instead. At that point I had no option to try and find somebody. So I don't, there's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her, that's it. That is all I know. I just parked my car up and then the van come up behind me, flashed me. They all jumped out and then they took this girl. They said, you've done good.
He then transported her to a pond near Dover, where he subjected her to sexual violence, took her life, burned her body, and discarded her remains. A former officer with the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, Couzens was initially detained on suspicion of kidnapping and later charged with her kidnapping and murder after Everard's body was discovered in woodland near Ashford, Kent, on March 10th. Couzens joined the Metropolitan Police from the Civil Nuclear Constabulary in September 2018 and was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Section, responsible for the uniformed protection of government and diplomatic facilities. Notably, he had not undergone enhanced vetting as part of his recruitment and had not completed the mandatory 2-year probationary period before joining the PADP.
On the 9th of February 2022, he was sentenced to imprisonment for life with a whole life order. Stewart seeks leave to appeal against sentence. The circumstances of his case do not fall within the terms of the statutory provision which provides that a whole life order should be the normal starting point, subject to possible adjustment for the individual facts. It is not one of those rare cases where nonetheless a whole life order should be imposed. We grant leave to appeal and substitute a minimum term of 35 years.
In the legal proceedings that followed, Couzens pleaded guilty to Everard's kidnapping and sexual assault on June 8, 2021, and later accepted responsibility for her murder, entering a guilty plea on July 9th. On September 30th, 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison. Although he attempted to appeal, his efforts proved unsuccessful. Seth Eklund, a security guard, took a Lucas County Sheriff's deputy, Alan Gaston, at gunpoint inside the Internal Revenue Service office in Toledo. Eklund's motivations centered around his belief that no one should be exempt from federal law, not even law enforcement officers. Deputy Gaston, aged 57, visited the IRS office at 422 North Summit Street to inquire about a letter he had received. Despite being on duty and in full uniform, he informed Mr. Eklund that he was there for personal matters. At this point, Eklund requested that Deputy Gaston remove his firearm. During their conversation, Deputy Gaston asked if there was a place where he could securely store his gun while inside the office, but no suitable option was available. Eklund then insisted that Deputy Gaston take his weapon outside and leave it in his vehicle, which the deputy couldn't comply with.
I completely felt like I was going to be killed. Everything did flag, take your gun and duty belt off, and I said, well, I can't do that. I swear to God, stop, and he goes into that position, which is this one right here.
When Deputy Gaston declined to leave his firearm unattended, as other alternatives were not provided, Mr. Eklund reportedly drew his own weapon and attempted to detain Deputy Gaston. Another employee in the office called 911, stating that a man with a gun was inside the office, refusing to leave. The caller did not mention Deputy Gaston's position with the sheriff's office. The U.S. General Services Administration, which establishes regulations for conduct on federal property, states that federal law prohibits the possession of firearms or dangerous weapons in federal facilities and federal court facilities unless specifically authorized by Title 18, United States Code, Section 930. Violators may face fines and imprisonment for up to 5 years. Those authorized to carry firearms in federal buildings include federal, state, and municipal law enforcement officers while conducting official duties, federal officials and armed forces personnel, and individuals engaged in lawful activities such as hunting. In at least one federal building in Toledo, officers visiting the federal courthouse are required to secure their firearms in a lockbox while conducting business, as confirmed by Alex Rutter with the U.S. Marshal's Office, responsible for security in federal courthouses. However, this option was not made available to Deputy Alan Gaston. As a result, Mr. Eklund was reportedly terminated from his position and is facing 2 counts of aggravated menacing.
Punished. As a result of my actions, I caused panic in the community, caused citizens of the African American community to be targeted and inconvenienced.
This is the story of Noah Lennon, a former Warren police officer who publicly expressed remorse for his involvement in a misleading claim concerning a shooting incident. This incident unfolded in January 2020, triggering a frantic response from fellow law enforcement personnel as they attempted to identify the alleged wrongdoer. Later, it was disclosed that the provided information was inaccurate. As a consequence of his actions, Noah Lennon has been sentenced to serve time in jail. Noah Lennon, previously an officer with the Warren Police Force and now classified as a convicted individual, had a significant moment during his court appearance.
This officer who had sworn to uphold and follow the law, from someone who made police work his life and would never do anything that would jeopardize not only his image, but the image of all officers everywhere, to someone who was so broken that I made a series of bad decisions.
This marked the first instance since his arrest that he directly addressed the court, shedding light on the occurrences that transpired on January 13th of the prior year. According to the prosecutors, on that specific day, it is claimed that Lennon experienced a mental health crisis. He utilized his police-issued communication device to report a distressing incident, alleging that he was confronted by an individual in a dark-colored SUV who supposedly discharged a weapon at him. This distress call provoked an extensive response, with approximately 60 law enforcement officers rushing to his aid and conducting traffic stops. The situation escalated to the point where officers encircled an entire apartment complex in hopes of locating the alleged wrongdoer.
Black man in a hoodie is a very suspect statement made in today's society right now, and the court can't.
However, upon thorough investigation, it was uncovered that Lennon's account of the events was fabricated. The incident that had triggered such a substantial police operation turned out to be untrue.
I hope that all those affected can forgive me, as I am truly sorry for what I did and what problems it caused.
The damage that Mr. Lennon did to the Warren City Police Department and the African American community in Warren City, there's nothing that he can do to make up for that.
Lennon mentioned that he had sought professional medical assistance and received a diagnosis for a significant health condition, although he did not provide further details regarding the nature of this condition. Lennon's punishment has been determined as 9 months of confinement at the Lorain Correctional Institution. This penalty was imposed due to his failure to meet the obligation of paying over $10,000 in restitution to the police officers who had responded to the incident that night. Theodore Dyer, a former Muskegon County Airport police officer, met a grim fate while serving time in prison for first-degree criminal sexual conduct involving a 9-year-old girl. Dyer was sentenced to 25 to 50 years for this heinous crime. The incident began when a woman referred to as Mary and her 9-year-old daughter moved to a Grand Haven apartment in Michigan, next to Dyer's residence in April 2012. Dyer appeared to be an average suburban citizen living with his girlfriend, and there was no reason for Mary to suspect his dark secret. Dyer and his girlfriend did not have children of their own, which may have contributed to his twisted fascination with kids. This twisted fascination remained concealed beneath Dyer's seemingly cheerful and easygoing demeanor. The victim's mother, Mary, spoke about her initial perception of Dyer before the incident, stating that she never had any reason to worry about him. She mentioned the pleasant relationship she and her daughter had with Dyer and his girlfriend, with Dyer even behaving as though he had adopted her kids. Around a year after they had moved in June 2013, Mary's daughter went to Dyer's apartment like any other day. However, that day turned out to be a nightmare when Mary unexpectedly entered Dyer's apartment. She had a feeling not to knock, and upon entering, she witnessed the horrifying sight of Dyer assaulting her daughter. Mary reacted immediately, rescuing her daughter and dialing 911. Dyer was subsequently arrested and convicted of 1 count of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. To Mary's shock, her daughter revealed that this was not the first time, and that it had occurred at least 3 times. Dyer was found guilty and sentenced to 25 to 50 years at the Saginaw Correctional Facility. About 10 months into his sentence, Theodore Dyer met a tragic end when he was strangled in his cell at the Saginaw Correctional Facility by another inmate, Stephen Sanderson. Stephen Sanderson was charged with second-degree murder for his involvement in his cellmate's death. It's a well-known fact that sex offenders and those convicted of child molestation often face significant risks in prison. Many of them meet violent ends at the hands of fellow inmates. They may be brutally beaten, maimed, or even killed, either in their cells or in common prison areas. These events are unfortunately a reality in the prison system. Typically, individuals convicted of crimes involving children or women are placed in protective custody because of the heightened risks they face. This is due to the fact that violent incidents targeting child offenders are not uncommon, as many hardened criminals inside don't tolerate such crimes. Following Theodore Dyer's murder, Stephen Sanderson was apprehended by prison guards and subsequently interrogated. Here's what Sanderson had to say about the incident.
He told me what he was in prison for, that he had, was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it. And, I told him that's enough. I don't want to hear any more. I first, punched him a couple times, still wouldn't shut up.
Theodore Dyer had been persistently speaking about his innocence and how he believed he was set up for a crime he didn't commit. Sanderson couldn't tolerate listening to Dyer's ramblings for an extended period. After a confrontation, he ended up punching him. Sanderson then described his actions immediately following the murder of his cellmate.
Still kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being set up and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just got mad and then hit him and then I killed him. When I hit him and knocked him out, and then I took the shoelaces out of his shoes, tied them together, wrapped it around his neck, and strangled him.
Throughout the trial, Stephen Sanderson appeared to accept his sentence as if he was relieved to receive it.
After I was done, I was aware of what I was doing, and then I just put him on his bed and covered him up and climbed in my bed and went to sleep.
Here's an overview of the trial proceedings. He depicted his actions as if he had merely arranged a meeting between Theodore Dyer and God.
The reason I killed him was because he was a child molester. You did in fact kill him? Oh, sure. And you intended to? Oh, sure, yes. Well, if it's all right, I'd like to tell you where it started. Go ahead. All right, well, he was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation.
In the end, Judge Borchard imposed the maximum penalty on Sanderson.
I don't know, I've been getting these emails saying that, it's not my position to judge anybody. And I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up.
Adding an additional life sentence with the possibility of parole to his existing sentence of life without parole.
Plead to the second count of murder in the second. Guilty?
Yes, sir.
And doing so freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Derek Stafford, the former deputy marshal, was involved in a tragic incident on November 3, 2015, in which he shot and killed 6-year-old Jeremy Mardis during a traffic stop. The shooting took place while Jeremy's father, Chris Few, was driving. The confrontation began when Stafford and a colleague attempted to pull Few over, but he failed to comply, leading to a car chase. After a 2-mile pursuit, Stafford fired 14 shots into Few's vehicle, even though video footage showed that Few had his hands raised in surrender. During his trial, Stafford expressed remorse and issued an apology to Jeremy's father, stating that he wouldn't have opened fire if he had known a child was in the car. Stafford was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter and attempted manslaughter. The court sentenced him to 40 years in prison on March 31, 2017, with a required minimum of 20 years and a maximum of 60 years. Following the sentencing, emotions ran high outside the courthouse, with mixed opinions on whether justice had been served. Stafford's aunt, Bertha Walker Andrews, contested the verdict, characterizing it as a form of modern-day slavery. She was particularly upset with those who prosecuted her nephew, suggesting that a black man shouldn't be condemned for killing a white individual. Connie Ganyard, a local member of the group Justice for Jeremy, believed the case was about the facts rather than race and found the punishment appropriate given the circumstances of the shooting. John Sinkfield, the lead prosecutor, considered the judge's decision to be just, while Stafford's attorneys, though disappointed, remained hopeful that their client might one day be released. Former Winter Haven police officer Brandon Boone was charged with battery in connection with an incident that occurred at the Polk County Jail. Security video footage from inside the jail captured Boone striking a handcuffed inmate with his knee before taking the inmate into a darkened room. The inmate, Ronald Augustin, alleges that Boone and other officers beat him and broke his leg. However, Boone strongly denies any wrongdoing.
Femur bone in my leg. Punching me, hit me in my mouth, shot me with a pen.
During a status hearing on the case, Boone's attorney informed the judge that they had been unable to reach a resolution with the state attorneys. The attorney stated, "Your Honor, we've been trying to resolve this with the state. It seems we are not going to resolve it. It's going to be a trial case." He also mentioned that there would be a large number of witnesses, and he had not yet had the opportunity to interview all of them. As of the hearing, a trial date for the case had not been set.
I don't wish anything bad to happen to him. It was just a crazy situation. I don't know Renal. Never met him prior to this day. His leg turned the wrong way, bent the wrong way, and ended up broke.
The case of Joyce Mitchell and the escape of David Sweat and Richard Matt from an upstate New York prison is indeed a dramatic and fascinating one. Joyce's involvement in helping the prisoners escape by providing tools and planning to meet them outside the prison shows the serious breach of her responsibilities as a prison worker. Joyce Mitchell's claim that she only helped the inmates because she believed they had threatened her family, particularly her husband, adds a layer of complexity to the case. It's clear that the inmates used her vulnerability and fear to manipulate her into assisting their escape.
I did wrong. I deserve to be punished. But, people need to know that I was only trying to save my family.
The inmates' extravagant escape plan, which involved cutting through cell walls, breaking through a brick wall, and crawling through a steam pipe, was like something out of a movie. The fact that they successfully executed this plan and managed to stay on the run for several weeks led to a statewide search and widespread concern.
We don't know if they are still in the immediate area or if they are in Mexico by now.
Mitchell, I just don't find that explanation credible. Your husband's life would not have been more endangered by exposing the plot to escape.
Joyce Mitchell's ultimate arrest and sentencing reflect the seriousness of her actions. The judge's words during her sentencing, where he emphasized the severity of her actions and her misplaced belief that the plea deal was too harsh, serve as a reminder of the consequences of her involvement in the escape.
While you express remorse for the harm you caused the community, you also stated that you believe the negotiated sentence is too harsh. Taking into consideration all the various sentencing factors, I can assure you, you have nothing to complain about with the negotiated sentence. For the reasons stated, I will approve the sentence and proceed as follows.
Her sentence of 2 1/3 years to 7 years in prison, along with a fine of $5,000, reflects the legal consequences she faced for her role in the escape.
I can assure you, you have nothing to complain about with the negotiated sentence. For the reasons stated, I will approve the sentence and proceed as follows.
This case's infamy even led to a Golden Globe-winning miniseries based on the events. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.